chickens are having a lot more of that white typrophyte.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about it, when you look at it, it's paler in color. It's like
Mm-hmm.
a pink. We cook it, it's almost like a sheet of paper white
Right.
sometimes. And so they're going to have a lot more of that type 2B.
Mm-hmm.
In comparison to beef, we'll have more type 1, and it has quite a bit of type 2A.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to MeatsPad, a platform dedicated to sharing breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the meats industry. On each episode, we will hear from meat specialists and professionals to talk about numerous topics in meat science. This podcast is brought to you by the U.S. Meat Export Federation, UltraSource, the new standard for innovation. Viscofan is a global leader and innovative partner in the food industry who provides solutions for the casing market.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. It is Phil flying solo yet again. Francisco's out making the world a better place for us meat enthusiasts. And we have today with us Dr. Amanda McKeith.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
Getting all the names. And thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, so Amanda is a professor of animal science, meat science at Fresno State University.
Yep.
And not far from your hometown. We'll get to that at some point. We'll get to that at some point. So, I wanted to have you come in today and remind us. We need to get back to basics. Okay. We talk on every topic on this podcast, and everything from international relations and humanitarian efforts and salt curing and everything. But we need to get all the way back down to some of the basics and some things that maybe our processors, our purveyors, folks that work in the meat industry, maybe need either a refresher or an introduction to just some basic muscle biology. Okay, and so what I wanted you to come in and tell us a little bit about is, first off, let's remind the audience what are the three main muscle tissue types, and then we'll get into muscle fiber types.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Fun stuff.
So.
Yes. So we have to think about, in terms of our three muscle types, is the fact that we have our skeletal muscle.
Okay. Yeah.
We have our heart tissue, our cardiac muscle, and then we have our smooth muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And those are in terms of our viscera and stuff. So we have to think about, in terms of those, which are going to add, and what do they add to that muscle or our meat component.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So of course, with those three muscle types, they have different, in terms of being multinucleated or not, ones in which we have to think about in terms of what do they add to that meat system. And our one that we really have to focus on is we focus on that skeletal muscle type.
Yeah.
Definitely so, because that's our building block in terms of our meat blocks, whether we're curing or our fresh muscle, where our others are, we're talking more about byproducts, and other things within the industry that maybe we're not manipulating quite as much as we are our skeletal muscle, because we're using our skeletal muscle more in terms of making further processed meats.
Right. And skeletal muscle is going to make up the majority of the meat that we get off of an animal.
That's definitely so, yes.
Right. So, and that's going to be the most traditional. And for those out there who are maybe less familiar with these scientific terms that we're talking about, skeletal muscle meaning like the muscle that is attached to a bone somewhere.
Right.
Versus
definitely.
Cardiac muscle, the heart muscle, that's not attached to a bone. It's just it's its own unique system.
It definitely is, and one that is very important to the living animal, but maybe not so much so when we talk about getting into some of our meat products, that it can actually contribute to some problems that we could have within those products. Yeah. So, but definitely one in which is very unique in its characteristics.
Yeah, and we do harvest the heart muscle from our meat animal species, but like you say, it's one that we may use as a limited amount in some certain further processed items.
Definitely.
Right. Yeah. And it's and as far as the other two beyond skeletal muscles, cardiac muscle is probably going to act the most similar to skeletal muscle.
Yes,
right?
Definitely.
What do we do with our smooth muscle types?
A lot of those smooth muscle types, as I said, are more of our byproducts. Yeah. So things like, coming from California, we're used to menudo and some of those different things that we have to think about. They're muscles that we have to cook long and slow.
Yeah.
And that's just because of the makeup. They're built to have some stretch and elasticity to them, and that's the way that muscle is constructed. So they're very special and unique in the way we have to treat them when we talk about breaking them off of, or removing them from the carcass and what we're going to utilize them for.
Yeah. So the smooth muscle types being a lot of our digestive organs, right? So the stomachs and when we're talking about stomach and intestines, and then when we're talking about, say, the ruminant animal, that's where the menudo would come in, or the tripe, right? Yes. Yeah. And then what do we do with those intestines?
The intestines, of course, are in terms of, if we're talking about more of the pork side, definitely is our natural casings.
Yep.
And that's where they're going to come into play. Ones in which, in the U.S., we're going to clean them a little. Generally, we're going to send them overseas, clean, salted, and we're going to ship them back and utilize them in our natural products that we're using as a natural casing. So that hog casing, we can go more upscale and use a lamb casing because it has more snap and bite to it. And then beef bunks and stuff are really popular when we're talking about our dried Italian cured products.
Right. Yeah.
So those are really big when we get into those specialty markets.
Right.
Again, pork being the most common because it's the easiest in terms of utilizing because, again, we're dealing with a monogastric system versus a ruminant system. So they're a little bit easier to clean, a little bit more easy to utilize, and they're a little bit more uniform in their diameter than necessarily we get into some of the beef and stuff. Those are too large.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but like some of those 4 or 5 inches, I don't know if I need a meat product quite that big in terms of sausage, but a hog casing is really good in terms of diameter, getting about that 1 inch to 2 inches. And that lamb casing, again, it's a little bit more expensive in the U.S., but it's one that we can utilize if we're using for gourmet hot dogs and stuff, because it does add that snap and bite that is very unique in that you like. It's one that we use in terms of a couple of little products that we use at Fresno State that are especially high-end things, again, because it costs a lot more.
Yeah.
If we look at the amount of lambs that we harvest in the U.S., it's very minimal compared to our hog harvest. So a product that just, a little bit harder to utilize too, it does break just a little bit easier, we're finding with our students. So.
Yeah. Well, So that's a great explanation. And hopefully folks are starting to realize that, we do use the whole animal. Really, we do, if we have the capability. And usually it's going to be in a larger processing setting. But all of those different pieces and parts, they are muscle. It's just different types of muscles, right?
Definitely.
Okay. So with that, let's go into let's get a little bit even more technical. And this is some of the stuff that I know it's probably a little bit more foreign to a number of our processors out there, but the different muscle fiber types, and that's different from tissue types.
Right.
So different muscle fiber types. So tell me a little bit about that.
So fiber types, we're really looking at the fiber is the functional unit of that skeletal muscle. That's our building block. They're large multinucleated cells. They have and they're the largest in the body in terms of our fiber types systems. When we look at our skeletal muscle fiber types, we're looking at their ability in terms of oxidative capabilities. We're looking at, are they slow twitch, fast twitch? And those muscles have different necessities across our body. And all three, there's 3 types of those muscle fiber types, and they're found throughout the body, and they're found in all 3 are found in every muscle. They're just going to be found in different proportions of that muscle, depending on what that muscle is utilized for. So we generally talk it in 2 broad terms. We say type 1 and type 2, or our red and white fiber types. Our red fiber types, of course, are ones that are going to have more myoglobin. And we talk about myoglobin, that's meat color. That is where we're, that's where we see a majority of our difference in terms of pork and beef, and looking at different muscle or different even muscles within the system. It's like looking at a chicken breast versus a chicken thigh. They're 2 different colors. Why? Because of that muscle fiber type that's predominantly found in that area.
Yep. And that myoglobin being the iron-containing oxygen-binding compound.
Right.
That makes meat red.
It makes meat red, or it makes it brown, or it can make it a variety of colors depending on how long it's been sitting on that shelf.
Right. Oh boy! Wow.
We'll
have you back to get back into that triangle of meat color that we do learn about in our basic meat science classes. Okay, so you mentioned type 1 muscle fiber type, and that's a slow twitch. Right?
That is our slow twitch. It is our slow oxidative. It has lots of myoglobin. Has lots of mitochondria in it. but it's a muscle that slowly fatigues. So think about it as one that, you need for long distance traveling. It's one that we use in terms of like posture. If we're talking about humans, it's the muscles that we utilize to maintain our posture all day because it doesn't fatigue very easily.
That's interesting. Okay.
The mission of USMEF is to increase the value and profitability of the U.S. beef, pork, and lamb industries by enhancing demand for their products in export markets through a dynamic partnership of all stakeholders. Simply put, USMEF is putting U.S. meat on the world's table.
So, and I've heard it as equated to, say, a marathon runner's type muscle.
Right.
Okay. Maybe not as large as other muscle fiber types, but can go a very long time and long distance because it's using oxygen for producing energy. Okay.
Right.
Right. Okay.
And then we have our type 2, and within our type 2, we have generally referred as alpha red or our alpha white. We'll go start with the white because that's the furthest one in terms of the red that we've already talked about. That's our fast twitch glycolytic. It's one that has lower myoglobin content or the lowest of our 3 types. It has the least amount of mitochondria. It's a fast twitch muscle. That is our sprinting muscle. That is the one, I like to use in my classes. We talk about a marathon runner or a weightlifter. We have to build those red types up. We have to be able to extend and utilize a lot of energy over a long period of time. We need oxygen. Our fast twitch are the ones that we're utilizing in an anaerobic situation, we're utilizing what energy is there. They are ones that fatigue very fast. So if you think about a sprint runner, like when they get done running, or I know if I try to sprint, like I'm gasping for air by the end of it. Pretty sure I wouldn't finish a marathon. So they tend to have a wider color.
Yeah.
So we think about, again, going back to that chicken, that's why you think about their wings, they don't use them a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's when they're utilized, it's really quickly they're flapping their wings and then they settle back down.
It's bursts of energy.
It's bursts of energy, yes.
But not sustained.
It's not sustained. And then we have that fast oxidative glycolytic that is our alpha red type. It's the one in the middle. So we have a medium amount of myoglobin compared to the other 2. It's moderate in its mitochondria. It's moderate in its fatigue, but it still has that red color. Not as dark, though, as our type 1s or red alpha or our red fiber types.
Right. Well, and some other terms that if you've heard about these muscle fiber types, that moderate one could be a type 2A, right?
2A.
Okay, and then the extreme sprinter type muscles, type 2B.
Right.
Okay. And I think this is exactly what we're looking for is just kind of a general understanding of the different muscle fiber types that can be found in the carcass. And can you give me some examples of which types of animals, maybe some species that would have more of one versus another?
Okay, so we sort of think about that in terms of, again, going to that poultry, we look at poultry in comparison to like beef.
Yep.
Chickens are having a lot more of that white type of fight. And you think about it, when you look at it, it's paler in color. It's like a pink. We cook it, it's almost like a sheet of paper white sometimes. And so they're going to have a lot more of that type 2B. In comparison to beef, we'll have more type 1, and it has quite a bit of type 2A. I like to throw in there when we're talking to my students that we think about mammals that live in the ocean. Yeah. So dolphins, whales. Okay. Those have lots of type 1 muscle fiber types. You think about the fact that they move very slow. They need to take in lots of oxygen and go down in terms of depth. So that's where we see a lot more of those types because they need to bind more oxygen for longer periods of time.
Right. Yeah. And go very, very long distances. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and that makes a lot of sense. And in my class too, I like to talk about the difference between the grazers and the monogastric prey type animals, if you really think about it. So the grazers, the ruminants, the cattle and the sheep and the goats, they have a tendency to go out and travel long distances to find their lunch. Whereas the chickens and the pigs, in many cases, are domesticated animals. They have lunch delivered to them. They don't have to travel very far. And so intentionally, we have kind of bred towards a little bit more of these white muscle fiber types, type 2B.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And we definitely have, because then if you start comparing that in terms of looking at the poultry side or fowl side, if we compare it to a wild game turkey,
Yep.
those are going to have a lot higher proportion of type 1 and type 2A than type 2B because of the way they have to, in terms of feeding, as you were talking about, that they have to go out and forage a lot
That's
more
right.
than our domesticated birds.
Yep, that's absolutely right. So some great examples, and I mean, we can sit and talk for hours about what kind of sensory experiences you would have with these different things, and I won't do that to you today, Amanda. But I think this is a great starting point for a lot of folks to continue to investigate, and hopefully we get questions from the audience if you want us to elaborate more on this. What we like to also do, so I've quizzed you enough on the scientific side of things. We do like to ask folks, how did you get involved in meat science? And tell us a little bit about what you do at Fresno State.
Okay, so I will say my venture into meat science actually started as a growing up on a cattle operation in Merced, so about an hour north of Fresno. I was in 4-H and FFA. So we had a carcass contest at our county fair for our beef cattle, and my sister and I always bred and fed our own steers, so they were all homegrown steers. And so I was always interested in terms of that genetic component. And so we started figuring out which of the bulls we utilized were more apt to grade choice or prime even. Yeah. And so I got really interested at that young age of, why does that steer, why did my sister, even though they're from the same herd, we feed them the same, why were they different?
Yeah.
And so I always had an interest, but I thought, I really like feeding cattle, so I thought I was going to be a ruminant nutritionist. Yeah. That lasted one semester when I was at K-State and took an intro to meat science class from Melvin Hunt. And that's where I fell in love. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I was on the livestock judging team at that time, still had time to finish my degree. So jumped on the meat judging team and I was like, I found my home. This is where I want to be. In terms of, from there, I went on and got my PhD at Penn State and really fell in love with processed meats. And really looking at natural cures and stuff and looking at those interactions in terms of food safety. And went on in terms of got a position at Fresno State where I focused, a lot of my research has been focused on Appendix A, challenge studies in terms of trying to help those small processors get their processes verified and ability to do their products in terms of making Appendix A requirements. In addition, color, sort of with Melvin Hunt, always love color.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta
legendary.
have legendary, yes, legendary meat scientist in terms of color. And then I also have an interest in terms of swine side of things in terms of pork. That came from Terry Hauser in terms of my master's professor, working in terms of what we fed pigs and how that affected meat quality and particularly bacon quality. And bacon, of course, being like the meat candy of the world. Yeah. So I really like that type of stuff in terms of research. I haven't got to do as much of that in terms of California because we're not necessarily a big pig state. So very much focusing more on the processing or Appendix A food safety side, as well as dried salami products. My colleague, John Henson at Fresno State, we have a long-standing tradition in terms of salami manufacturing at Fresno State. So looking at different things that we can utilize there in terms of cure ingredients, as well as maybe even speeding up that process a little bit in terms of churning over our cabinets a little bit faster than every 24 days.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up a really good point that we can land this plane on is the Salumi 101, one of the locations where you can participate in that particular project or one of those workshops is indeed Fresno State University. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and for those who are less familiar, if you have an interest in salami making, prosciutto, coppa, bresaola, all these different old world cured meat items, this is one of those locations where you can really learn a lot from some very practical individuals. This is offered through the American Meat Science Association. So go on to meatscience.org and check that out. But do you have anything else to contribute to the Salumi 101?
I'll say it's a great experience having helped with two of them. And whether it's at Fresno State, Penn State, University of Wisconsin, or North Carolina, or the 4 locations it rotates to, there's going to be probably one close to you. I definitely suggest if you have any interest. If anything, you eat very well for a couple days.
Absolutely. Oh, my gosh. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you for
hopefully
having me.
We'll get a chance to visit again.
Sounds great. Thanks,
All right.
Phil.
Yep.